The Unthinkable Second Transformation of the Fascia Ragusana. A story narrated by FMH. Have you ever wondered why in supermarkets you can buy the same vegetables year-round? Do you know where almost all of the non-seasonal vegetables come from? They come from a few highly specialized areas where the mild climate allows for vegetable production in horticultures even in winter. In almost all of these places, the horticulture happens in wooden or steel structures covered with one-use plastic. The high demand of the consumers led to these areas to grow into huge sizes, leading to a variety of environmental and social problems. Still, this is a common and very profitable practice which has been unchallenged for quite a while. Unchallenged? No. Let us tell you a story. Let's take a closer look to Sicily. More precisely, our story takes place in the Fascia Ragusana. For the last 60 years, this place has been continuously transformed from a natural strip of coast into a gigantic sea of plastic horticulture, earning the name of Fascia Trasformata. There are many things going wrong here. First and most obviously, the huge amount of plastic waste produced by the constant replacement of the plastic foil of the greenhouses. But the problems go way deeper. But there is still hope. One farm in the middle of the plastic greenhouses stands strong, the farm of Gianluca. Gianluca does agriculture in a different way. His farm is a permaculture where fruit and vegetables are produced in harmony with the environment and the people involved. In permacultures, not all plants grow separately, but rather in seeming disorder, side by side and on 3 vertical levels, on the ground, in shrubs and trees. The aim is to closely pair plants that benefit from one another to achieve a resilient food production in the highest possible quality. This is a way of agriculture that also involves a lot of try and error, but often leads to pleasantly surprising results. One day, while Gianluca is out working on his fields, his neighbor Mario waves him over and asks him for advice. "I've got problems with the quality of my products. The groundwater we use for irrigation is way too salty and still shows contamination with pesticides we stopped using years ago. Now the ground can sustain the plants and we have to use large amounts of fertilizer. I'm also bothered with our dependency on genetically modified seeds. They are incredibly expensive and can't be reproduced." Okay, difficult situation. Maybe we can start by restoring the quality of your soil. This will take some time, but if you use the right plants, they can absorb the salt and contamination of the ground. And for a start, I can provide you with some of my crops and you can start reproducing them yourself. While Mario has successfully started to restore his soil and even grew his first own plants, Gianluca is talking to his neighboring farmer, Giulia. "One of my workers and his family have been struggling to find an adequate place to live and now are staying at my place. But this is just no long-term solution. The children struggle to get to school and back because there is no public transport, and the mother can't work because she has to care for them in the afternoon. And above all, they feel isolated and can't integrate in the local community. I think we both agree that the workers should not live invisibly between the greenhouses, but ideally in one of the close towns. I just don't know how we could accomplish this." "You know what? I know exactly what we can do. I own a small shop in Marina di Acate and have been thinking about building an apartment on top of it for quite a while. This finally seems to be the right time for it." Without thinking long, they set out to build the apartment. With no precise plan and no real budget, they had to be creative. Mario was kind enough to provide the wood from the greenhouses he disassembled to build the raw structure. To fill the wooden frames, they pressed their own mud bricks from the clay soil of their farms and reinforced them with the thrown-away plastic strings from their horticulture. That's the structure done. The rest is up to them. "Papa, can we build my room here?" Curious about what his neighbors have been up to lately, Francesco approaches Gianluca and talks to him about joining in the collaboration of the others. He has become increasingly frustrated with the low prices set by the big vendors. The idea of a production cooperative arises. Inspired by cooperatives that are already common in other parts of Sicily, they decide to follow their example and found their own cooperative to gain independence from the big retailers. If we could really market the products directly, we could use the gained profit to reduce the horticulture, remediate the soil in the way you proposed, and establish a more sustainable agriculture. This would also be an opportunity to support our workers and better their quality of living, and in case one of us suffers from crop failure or some other unforeseen difficulties, we could support each other. Quite some time later, Gianluca is sitting on his front porch reminiscing about the last few months. Satisfied, he looks around and sees the change around him. This had been unthinkable formerly. For the first time in as long as he can remember, the sea of plastic around him seems to back off. The cooperative is formed, a lot of other farmers have joined in, and it's a big success. The quality of their products is constantly improving, further greenhouses have been removed, and many members already grow in the natural soil again. The demand for their products is constantly increasing. Gianluca sees the potential for this to transform the whole Fascia Ragusana. We might just be able to pull off the unthinkable. It's time for the next step. Berlucci, remind me to invite the others for dinner. We need to come up with something bold. The cooperative has formulated their vision for the future of the Fascia Ragusana and written 7 theses on a large rock and pulled it on the main square of Scoglietti. They gain a lot of attention. People gather around, the media shows up, and Rai even broadcasts an interview with Gianluca nationally. Why did you do this? For too long, we farmers have been pressured into producing more and more for less and less. And for a long time we have abided by this, but the consequences have transformed our home beyond recognition. But now we have formed and are ready to change this. The stand of the farmers did the unthinkable. The Governmental Regional Planning Committee invited the cooperative to Rome to jointly develop a future vision for the Fascia Ragusana that can ultimately lead to a new ecological zoning planning for the region and determine other necessary governmentally supported measures. By connecting and reinforcing the existing green spaces, we can create a resilient and biodiverse landscape. This will also reduce the heat island effect. Between the conservation areas and the new agricultural landscape, there should be ecological transition zones where only permaculture is allowed. The rivers and water reservoirs have to be protected to ensure water retention and secure the water resources in the long term. The legally required 150-meter distance to the sea that has been ignored so far should be re-established as a green space to create an ecological corridor that will battle erosion and also be great for recreation. There has to be a functioning waste disposal and recycling system for the whole area. Next, they developed a detailed strategic plan of how to gradually achieve the vision. The ideal first step would be for all the farmers of the Fascia Ragusana to join in the cooperative to maximize the leverage and funds for the transformation process. While the strategy then involves measures that can be started by the cooperative right away, governmentally supported funding and ecological zoning planning lay the foundation for profound structural changes. Energy production in combined agri-solar systems also plays an important part, helping to provide environmentally friendly electricity for the region while also earning funds for the transformation process. A new agricultural concept in accordance with the newly defined ecological zoning is implemented. To solve the problem of the salty and contaminated groundwater used for irrigation, a new solution is arranged. This enables the use of treated wastewater from the nearby treatment plant in Acate, as already proposed by researchers of the University of Catania. To provide adequate housing for the farm workers and their families, planning is started for social housing to be built in several of the towns of the region. This, in the next step, enables social and cultural initiatives. The gathered funding through direct marketing, lease of land to energy companies, and governmental funding can be used for a step-by-step transformation of the agricultural landscape. Firstly, the areas of the farms with worst quality soil can be remediated while conventional production in the remaining areas can continue. The remediation can happen through the cultivation of a variety of suitable plants that can reduce the salinity of the soil, bind contaminants and enrich it with nutrients. Where natural remediation is impossible, small areas of soil can be replaced. After the soil has regained its fertility, organic food production can start within these areas, gaining additional revenue in distribution, which in turn can be used to remediate further areas of the farms. This process can be continued until all contaminated soil has been remediated and almost all food production can happen in organic quality. Finally, a small portion of the gained revenue should be used for social and cultural initiatives supporting the farm workers, their families and communities. The implementation of the new zoning planning and the agricultural concept leads to a vastly different appearance of the landscape. In the designated zones, the greenhouses have been removed and the farmers were compensated or enticed to establish permacultures respectively. The conservation areas around the rivers lead to important ecological corridors serving biodiversity and environmental resilience. They also ensure adequate water retention and permanently protect the water resources of the region, counteracting the progressing desertification. The protected transition zones only allow for scattered permaculture farms among re-established green spaces. Along the border of the agricultural landscape, food production happens in open field agriculture. The new agricultural landscape is a mix of horticulture in permanent greenhouses, agri-solar cultivation and open field farmland. To solve the housing problem of the workers and their families, a governmentally supported social housing scheme should be started. The aim is for the cooperative to collectively determine the housing demand of their workers and then find appropriate building lots in the towns of the Fascia Ragusana, so the workers and the families will really be integrated in the local communities. The building structures should be simple, adaptable and scalable frame constructions that can be erected and then finished internally by the farm workers themselves. The frame construction could be done by reusing the wooden struts and roof trusses from the disassembled greenhouses of the farms. For the wall fillings, self-made adobe bricks could be made from the replaced soil of the farms, which could be reinforced with the discarded plastic strings from the horticultures. The structures have to be big enough to provide space for later adaptations and extensions done by the inhabitants themselves. They should also provide sufficient space for cultural and social events and workshops, and include small markets for the products of the cooperative. After the workers and their families have appropriated the structures, the focus can be shifted to further support their integration in the local communities. Exhibitions and events can promote cultural exchange, and workshops and lectures can encourage education of old and young. Childcare outside of school has to be established, preferably in cooperation with existing social institutions, and the female workers should be supported to gain independence and provide for themselves. All inhabitants of the region would benefit from improved public transport and the establishment of shared taxis, car and bike sharing hubs and extensive bikeways. And if all those things came true, the unthinkable would become reality. Can you imagine what it would look like?